Welcome everyone to the sponsorship session. As you know, sponsorship is very important to everyone's budget, and it could be more important to many of you, knowing the correct way of identifying sponsors, approaching sponsors, and then making a great partnership. So my work, I'm Lisa Delpy-Neirotti from the George Washington University. We have a sport philanthropy executive certificate program. And one of the things that we do is we help students diversify their revenue sources. So many nonprofits rely primarily on individual giving or grants. And the concept of sponsorship is not always well understood. So in this session, we're hoping to provide more of an inside look at what sponsorship is and how you can go about increasing your revenue through sponsorship. So with that, I'm excited to have with me some experts in the area. Rajiv Khanna with Sponsor United, Daryl Evans, who spent many years with AT&T and many other organizations, currently with ISC, Seth Rosenzweig with Team Impact, and Lou Rosenberg with the Jewish National Foundation. I'd like to open it up first to let each one of our panelists give a brief overview of their current role and history in sponsorship. So Rajiv.
All righty. Well, thank you for having me, Lisa, and Sports Philanthropy Network. Rajiv Khanna, I lead partnerships and sales here at Sponsor United. My journey here has been quite interesting. So I'm kind of a data guy at heart. I came up from the Nielsen company, went into digital media, ended up at the Nielsen company again a couple of years ago at Nielsen Sports. So storytelling around sponsorship is kind of in my DNA. I kept hearing about this little company called Sponsor United from all my pro sports clients. I ran the pro sports business, and then I finally reached out to the founder, saw what he was up to, and jumped on board about a year ago. Our business is very much all correlated towards sponsorship. What we're doing is basically tracking deals across all platform types, across sports and entertainment. And it's really interesting to see the types of different partnerships and sponsorships that are happening, especially in the nonprofit space. So I'll share a couple of examples as we get through the panel.
Great. Daryl?
Hi, hi everyone, and greetings from Atlanta. I'm Daryl Evans, as mentioned. Briefly, I'm doing some consulting work with a company called ISC, but the highlights that are most appropriate for this are I ran a lot of the Coca-Cola advertising for McCann Erickson for years and got involved with a lot of their sponsorships, from the Olympics to NASCAR to whatever. And then I ran advertising, media, and sponsorships for AT&T for 14 years. Sponsorships reported up to me in that role. And both of those brands, Coca-Cola and AT&T, we were quite active in the sponsorship world and in the sports sponsorship world. After that, worked for MediaLink for a while.
Oops.
Can you hear me?
We're good.
Okay. And then most recently, ran sports fundraising for the American Cancer Society, and did that for a couple of years up until early summer. So that's kind of my background. Been around a lot of sports sponsorship, mainly as the client or as the buyer of the sponsorship, and then using those contacts and networks to raise money for an awfully good cause.
Excellent. Okay, and Lou Rosenberg.
Hi, everyone. Lou Rosenberg. I'm the Executive Director of Jewish National Fund in Los Angeles. And prior to that, I had a 20+ year career in professional sports, primarily with the Los Angeles Clippers on the corporate development side, arena football, and also doing some individual work for some Major League Baseball and minor league baseball teams and some NCAA teams. And when I came to Jewish National Fund in a fundraising position, I realized that we had an inventory of great events that I could turn into sponsorship opportunities, and that's what we've done. So I think as we go further in the program, we'll start to we'll share some of those experiences. So thank you for having me.
Great. And Seth?
Thanks, everyone. Seth Rosenzweig. I'm the CEO for a nonprofit organization called Team Impact, where we work with kids living with serious and chronic illness and provide them with a therapeutic program by embedding them into the fabric of a college athletic team. And before that, I helped run the foundation for Boston Children's Hospital. And so sponsorships have been a big part of the work to diversify revenue sources and to create mutually beneficial partnerships in both categories, one in a more established brand and one at a newer brand.
And, Seth, what percent of your budget, if you could break it down, is related to sponsorship? And I'm also going to ask you this, Lou.
Yeah, a quarter of our budget.
Okay. And has that expanded, retracted, been about the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's expanded. I mean, so our budget's grown, right? We were $1 million, now we're over $5 million in a short period of time. And the reliance on sponsorship, we've diversified away from, I would say, just event-specific fundraising to a more diversified group of both sponsorships and then obviously traditional grants.
Right. And I do want to emphasize that the events that nonprofits hold are part of that sponsorship. Those are part of the benefits that sponsors
Correct.
get.
Correct.
Mhm.
Lou, what percent of your income right now or revenue is?
We're between 10 and 15%.
Okay.
And it's all sponsorship driven revenue from our events, to our events, I should say.
And that's kind of newfound money you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting way, when you're a philanthropic organization that's, raising a goal of $100 million a year, I've been starting to use events to show people a way that you could support Jewish National Fund and the people of Israel through donating to our events, but we're also promoting you back in an effort and doing creative ways of driving business back to you and helping promote you to a database of almost 1 million people.
And what's a growing trend in the professional sports field is that more and more corporate partners are looking to activate in communities, looking to activate in a corporate social responsible way. And so, Rajiv, what has your platform found out in terms of how many teams are activating? And
Yeah, so in the professional sports team and even the minor league space, we're seeing about 92% of all properties have at least one cause-related marketing activation. We track about 125,000 brands as well, local, regional, national, global. And what was interesting was we found only about 1,700, at least that we're aware of, have done a cause-related marketing campaign, which is a little less than 1%. Now, there could be some stuff that's hyper local that we haven't seen, but there is a huge opportunity for brands to kind of get involved with their local communities or certain kind of areas, which we can talk about in a little bit.
right, so Sponsoring United looks both at the brands and what they're doing, as well as the teams and their sponsors.
That's exactly right.
So how could a nonprofit use your platform?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way is we have all the contact information in their platform. So traditionally, the users of our platform are properties, whether it's a sports team, an entertainment property like the Grammys. They're looking for contacts at brands. We have their emails, but where we kind of differentiate is we wanted to kind of pull back the curtain of the sponsorship and media industry. So we'll not only show who a brand's currently partnered with, but we'll actually show what assets they're actually buying. And within that, there's actually a bucket of cause-related marketing. So a huge trend we saw when COVID first started, right? I called 5 to 10 of my close friends at teams, and I was like, what are you guys doing? Your corporate partners asking for money back. And they're like, it's everyone kind of has a general understanding that things are, a bit in limbo, and they've been okay about that. But the number one thing we care about is giving back to our local community. So there was this kind of yearning in the sports world to take care of their fans and local communities that were hurting the most. and really seek sports and entertainment as an escape from reality, especially in such a difficult time. So that was a really big shift we saw, where I'd say if you looked at 2020 versus 2019 and years past, we've seen a triple digit spike in more of these types of activations. So as a nonprofit, kind of tapping into this library just to kind of see who's doing what with who, what are best practices, what are, I guess I wouldn't call them worst practices, but practices that need area for improvement. And we've seen that across like hunger relief, education, racial injustice, and some really cool activations that are happening along those themes.
And, you bring up a great point, Rajiv. There's so many new important, certain causes are in the limelight right now. They're very prevalent. Obviously, COVID is new, but social inclusion and racial equity. Daryl, you've been pitched hundreds, thousands of times. And, what's your advice for these nonprofits pitching brands at this time when there's so many needs out there?
Yeah, one thing that I've been a little surprised and even a little frustrated by. I go back for a little bit of context. This is something I think all of us on this call know, but if you consider a brand a person, and as a person you want to be a friend of your target customer, or at least considered favorably by your target customers, then you kind of want to connect yourself to the same things they're passionate about, which is the overall justification for sponsorships and so forth, I think, in the first place, and why we get involved with sports and why we get involved with things like, back in its day, American Idol, whatever, Dancing with the Stars, whatever. Intuitively, and there may be people here that have harder data than I've got here, but just intuitively, social justice, COVID, some of these issues are passions, strong passions for people and strong passions for potential customers or existing customers. So the pitches that I'm seeing or people are asking me to look at and provide comments on and so forth, it's amazing how many of them don't acknowledge COVID or don't acknowledge current events as well as they could. I think we were talking earlier that I'm seeing pitches around sports things that are still including 100 or 200 tickets to the arena. And these are events that are going to occur in the next 3 or 4 months. Well, I doubt if that's much value to the sponsor. But there may be some other things that are of hard value to the sponsor. But maybe more importantly is, are there elements of nonprofits, whether it's health, political, well, not political, but social, that a brand can tap into or a sponsor can tap into for the sake of their brand, and everybody wins. I hope that made sense.
And an example would be if you add a curriculum on social inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not only teaching basketball skills, but you're teaching social inclusion as part of your program. I mean, that's kind of a very rudimentary example here, but Raji, you also had some examples that you shared.
Yeah. So there was a few less, I guess, COVID related, although I have a couple I can talk through. But one obviously big area is hunger relief, right? And we've seen some kind of subcategory campaigns within hunger relief alone. So one is trigger promotions, very common within kind of sports marketing or around helping nonprofits. But every 5 yards, a team rushes, Stop and Shop delivers 5 bags of groceries to those in need. Or every quarterback sack, Food Line will deliver 1,000 meals to a foundation of your choice or whatnot. So that's one. The trigger promotions, very, very common. There's just general charitable giving, right? Food trucks brought to you by, I think there was one with like the Minnesota Vikings and Excel Energy up in Minnesota. And then just to kind of piggyback of what you were saying, Lisa, more educational programs. So the Texans and Kroger food stores, they did this huddle against hunger. And essentially they built a curriculum, fun activities to create empathy and understanding around hunger and in elementary schools and middle schools. So they were teaching these kids and students about those less fortunate and why it's so important to kind of give back, but making it a creative, fun learning experience. So we're seeing a lot of kind of that type of activation where brands are participating more on an educational standpoint. To that kind of respect, we've also seen, I think Chip Ganassi did something with Advent Health. They brought one of their professional NASCAR drivers. They call this guy the Melon Man. I forget what his name is, Ross something. And he helped deliver masks to a school district for a local community that desperately needed them. And, you know, they were still open during the early months of COVID. So we're seeing a really, really cool, I guess, shift in, you know, more innovation. So it's been really interesting to see kind of what 2020 has netted out.
Right. And Seth, you want to share examples of, you know, cause-related marketing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think just to go back one step, I think for us, it's about, you know, I think we oftentimes, kind of what Daryl was saying, relationships matter, right? You have to build strong and trusted relationships and use your network. It's hard to break in to get into the right decision makers within some of these brands and companies. And I think probably Rajiv's platform can help you figure that out more quickly. And the second thing is, I think, you know, lead with authenticity and show, you know, put yourself in the minds of the brand or the company to think about how you can create a mutually beneficial partnership. And that's something that we've had to do. Example is the space we work with, obviously sick kids, and we partner them with college athletic teams. So the best opportunity that we had was to go to the pharma biotech space, right? These are companies that are delivering drugs and therapies, but they also want to be good citizens to the kids that they serve, right? How can they help those kids today? So if it's Vertex Pharmaceuticals, how can they help kids with cystic fibrosis today? We went in there and we said to them, what do you hope to get out of a partnership? What are your needs? What are your priorities? Obviously, there was brand amplification, be able to position themselves in the marketplace. There was ability to obviously serve the kids by being part of our program. There was employee engagement. There was a variety of things that we learned along the way before we got to the final pitch for a significant multi-year, you know, 7-figure sponsorship, right? You may do more due diligence there than you would for your traditional event sponsor. So you're trying to figure out who wants to be in the room with the right people, and you that are willing to obviously invest, you know, with a table and get their brand out there. So I think it depends on level of sponsorship. But for us, I mean, we've done anything from a $10,000 table to a, you know, multi-million-dollar sponsorship with companies. And I think it all starts with relationships, and it all starts with, you know, putting a great mutually beneficial partnership out there that aligns with either their CSR strategy or aligns with the value set of that organization.
Right. And it's really, what do you have that can benefit that company, that brand,
right,
their consumers? Do not position the proposal about, well, I need. They don't care what your needs are. I hate to tell you. But if you can benefit, I mean, if you can mutually benefit, the focus should be on what their needs are and how to help that company, because you will ultimately benefit. But don't position it as, I need this.
Right. I mean, some of the companies have foundations that will focus on specific grants, and, you know, Lou knows this from his own experience, the difference between those, right? Some of it's like, oh, we align with their like CSR strategy versus like we're trying to develop something that's actually going to be mutually beneficial for them. And I think you have to know, like you said, don't over talk about what you need, really make it show them the opportunity by working together, how they can be better, stronger, and make an impact.
Right.
Yeah, I used to work for a guy that I used to say, and you know, you need my kind of accent, but you know, he said, everybody's listening to WIIFM. What's in it for me? And,
WIFM. So
WIIFM. So anyway,
yeah,
agree totally with what you're saying. I mean, even the foundations, you know, have certain goals in certain areas that they want to contribute to, and they're usually pretty closely aligned with what the company itself wants to do.
right. And, you know, think about their goals. And, you know, Visa makes money from people spending money through their credit card. Hotels make money by people spending the night. So if, you know, you aren't having people come in and travel and spend the night, it's hard to go after a hotel. But Seth, you were saying how you adjusted yours because the need right now for your, but the kids that are sick is what.
Yeah. So, I mean, during COVID, we adjusted in a variety of ways. One is you're talking about our pitch in terms of.
You adjusted it to be for transportation.
Yeah. So we basically, two things. We adjusted our pitch to be for transportation so that, a lot of the kids who have low family income were unable to get to and from. And then we obviously went to virtual. So we looked at helping pay for Wi-Fi, helping pay for computers and things like that. I think the other thing that we did is adjusted during this moment is what is our role? What I think you have to be authentic here, but what's our role in, the social injustice, racial inequality going on in this country? And for us, I'm not trying to go political on anything, but I think for us, it was about two things: access issues. So how can we ensure that all kids have access to our program, no matter race, identification, family income, et cetera. And the second was around we're engaging and transforming thousands of future leaders, right? The college athletes that we serve. And we built a full curriculum around that, around using your platform and your voice to make a difference. And so we were able to adjust during COVID and during this moment authentically to be able to align with some of those brands and some of the things that they cared about, which worked very successfully.
And Lou, you want to share how you've adjusted in this time?
During the COVID crisis, we were already halfway through our fiscal year, and there was a lot of panic if we would raise another dime over the next 6 months or however long it was going to be. We took the approach of being the good guy and reaching out to our donors and checking in with everybody and making sure everyone was okay and letting them know that we're here. And we did a lot of virtual type activity. From what I understand, there was a lot of nonprofits that fell by the wayside. We survived. We hit our goal for the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. Sometimes I shake my head and wonder, how we did it, but people still gave, and it's a cause. We're the cause. We don't do cause marketing. JNF is the cause. But what we have is, we of every dollar we raise, 83 cents goes to the project. So we have a 17-cent administration cost. We were able to do that and receive such a high ranking charity rating from Charity Navigator because we have an army of lay leaders. A lay leader is someone who donates to your project. They do social media for us. They promote JNF through their social media. They talk to their friends and help recruit and get other people involved. So at the beginning, like I said, I think it was just being in touch with our donors and not being aggressive and saying, hey, if you don't donate now, we are not going to survive. I didn't make an ask probably until the middle of June. Everything was basically customer service and public relations for the first couple of months of COVID.
Right. And how do you determine price? How much do you ask? This is a question that a number of people have.
Yeah, I see that question. It's a great question. So as an example, we just did a golf tournament. We've been doing it for 30 years in LA. We played at the Riviera Country Club. Riviera is an iconic course. We're one of 8 nonprofits in Los Angeles that play at this golf course. And just to walk in the door, it costs us $100,000. So what I do before I do any event is I create a cost sheet. I look at what are my costs going to be. If I want someone to sponsor my lunch and I know that to feed 100 people is going to cost me $5,000 for lunch, I'm putting together a package that sells for $16,000 that includes the four golf spaces. So you look at everything. My advice is you should always do a cost analysis sheet to know what your expenses are, because the last thing you want to do is have expenses of $100,000 and raise $100,000, because then you're doing an event to break even. So you need to, that's the most important thing, is to know what your expenses are going into any event, whether it's a golf tournament or even if it's a simple local event that has 25 people that I'm trying to get sponsors for. I do a cost sheet and figure out how much money I need to bring in.
Some rule of thumbs are that the entry fee, registration fee to your event should cover your cost, and then sponsorship would be your profits. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. The other way is looking at, okay, here's all my costs, here's my expected revenue, and I want to make X, Y, Z. So I need so much more money from sponsorships, and what should be then what's reasonable for a title sponsor, the highest level sponsor, secondary sponsor.
I mean, there's another event we do. It's a free event. I mean, it's free in that we make an ask at the event. And last year we brought in $600,000 the day of the event. But once again, our cost is the rental of the hotel. It was a breakfast. So how much does it feed how much does it cost to feed 1,000 people breakfast? The AV setup. So we know our expenses going in, and then we're looking at our sponsorships, because that's the only revenue that we can count on that day. We don't know if people are going to donate that day. We have an idea of how much money is going to come in, but the sponsorships, we know exactly how much to ask for because we have the cost.
And the market is different in every city. So what the PGA gets in Ohio is different than what they get in Long Island.
Yeah.
Hospitality. So you have to offer. It's not easy for the panelists to say, well, for every Cancer Society dinner, it's going to be this much for a round table, because a table of 10 in New York is going to be different. The costs are different.
I think you can easily look at, the first thing you can do is look at environmental scan of like what other organizations are doing to create a benchmark. The other thing you can do is if your host committee or your chairs, like we have a conversation around what do we hope to achieve and how we're going to cost things out based on the fact that we're serving constituents like them. So they help us kind of figure out the right, you never want to under ask, obviously you want to try to maximize potential, but you also want to be fair.
Yeah. So Lisa, this costs in general, terms, deal sizes, it comes up 100% of the time in all my conversations. And I think if someone had a strong answer or POV, they would be a very rich person. One approach that we've kind of taken is, look, it's still a relationship business. If Seth knows the average rate and Lou will give him a call, right? People in sports entertainment, they want to do business with their friends. We're attempting to do, and it's very, very difficult, is trying to get people to give us their data, secure it, anonymize it, almost like the Zillow Zestimate, that real estate app. And I think it'll be probably a year or two before we even get to that level of granularity where you can see the fundraising and cause marketing elements. But it's very challenging. And you're right, by market, by sport, by property, by experiential versus digital and social, it's very, very cumbersome. But I think right now, a lot of what's going on is temperature checking by calling peers.
And, there's the rule of thumb is that you should always try to have a conversation with the brand before you just submit some proposal to understand, you do your research first, look at their corporate reports, look at their website, read about, are they opening a new store in your area? What are they doing? And then, have some sort of conversation. If you can't, there's controversy whether you include a price or not. If you can't really have a conversation about, what kind of budgets are they looking at, you can also look at how much that company makes. If you know that a company has a very small marketing budget, you don't want to send them a $50,000 sponsorship deck, because that's their whole marketing budget. That's unrealistic for them. So do some research on the size of the company, how much they spend in marketing. So
we kind of had we had all the issues that we're just talking about here, but at the Cancer Society and others may have this as well, is we actually had an issue of trying to rein in the unmanaged use of the Cancer Society's IP and logo. The Cancer Society is a very locally driven organization, lots and lots of offices and people out there. And, and one of the things you learned was people were allowing just about anybody to use, the smallest little golf tournaments or a luncheon using the logo. And so we had to put some standards in kind of the other way. It's kind of opposite of what you think. We had to put some limits in and some approvals, which sounds awfully headquarterish and bureaucratic, but it had some elements to that. But we had to we had to put some minimums in. If you're going to use our logo and market your brand, and we're going to help your brand market itself, we had to have some minimum revenue built in. And I won't tell you what that was, because you're right, it varies according to the individual situation. But and you're right. I'll give you an example. The coaches versus coaches that I'm wearing in Nissan and March Madness was a very nice arrangement that the Cancer Society had for over a decade. Nissan was they weren't at the corporate champion level with the NCAA, but the next level down. We were an activation element for their sponsorship. We also allowed them to buddy up, I guess, for lack of more elegant language, with NCAA coaches. And, an awful lot of them were involved with coaches from cancer, from Roy Williams to who knows what. I'm a Tar Heel, so that one comes to mind real quickly. But Nissan, it was a 7-figure fundraiser for us. We didn't have to hold a big event. We didn't have to do anything like that, but we had to do some marketing things for them, and we had to run a survivor game on Friday mornings on the court, on Final Four court, and things like that. But that was an example where you knew they had very large investments in March Madness. They had large investments with the NCAA, both in football and basketball, and we were an activation element for their sponsorship. So we were a small percentage of what they spent overall, a very large fundraiser for us.
And, ways that you can target companies is to also leverage your board of directors or your board members. Some of them have ins with companies, maybe their own company, other companies. But I think it was Lou, you also had a strategy of some people, corporate sponsors, wanted to get in touch with or get closer relationships with your board members. And so
right. I mean, I'll give you a great example is there was a donor we were trying to work on in Los Angeles for many years. And through the database system, I could see the notes. So when I started with JNF in 2012, I saw all the rejections from this individual person. And then when I looked him up, I saw that he owned an auto dealership called the Auto Gallery, which in Southern California, there's multiple locations. And I called him up and he kind of rejected me. And I said, look, I'd really like to talk to you about the Auto Gallery becoming a sponsor of major events for JNF, and let's get creative and figure out how we could drive business back to your dealerships. And that's exactly what we did. So that's how I got in, was by creating a sponsorship for events. He ends up donating to Jewish National Fund, but it's to drive business back to the Auto Gallery. And it was a win-win.
right, exactly. Anybody else have an example of maybe one of your favorite sponsorships, and share with us how that partnership came to be? Seth, you have one with Lyft?
I'm working on it. I'll have one that's complete, but the one that, I think one of our favorite ones is actually an auto dealer in the Boston area. But the great thing about it was we were able to, show them why they could help position themselves as to differentiate from the other dealers within the Boston area by putting their kind of social responsibility hat out there on their commercials, on their radio ads, and really differentiate. And what we did is every year we give away cars to kids families are living with serious and chronic illness who can't get to their appointments back and forth, and they get a big, huge media press around that. But it's just, amazing to see these kids and families who couldn't afford a car to get to their appointments, to get there while also promoting the brand of the company. And we've only grown with them, right? They started out as like a $50,000 sponsor, and now they're, well into the 6 figures.
And, there's so many reasons why companies become sponsors pre-COVID. I'm not sure how much it is now. A lot of companies were having a hard time retaining millennials. Millennials switch jobs quite a bit. And the millennials, there's lots of research that shows they want to work for a company that support causes. And so oftentimes a company may sponsor a nonprofit where their employees can give back and can get involved, because that's, showing to the employees, wow, my employer cares, and they're even letting me have a day off to go work this event or work with these kids. So that's another angle that you can.
That's a big angle. Employee engagement right now is critical. I mean, we find it everywhere, whether it's, you know, a financial services company that we work with that do financial literacy for college athletes, you know, or for our kids and families, or it's a company that wants to do days of service to give back. You know, having a culture that is focused on doing good really, really matters.
Yeah, to that point, I'll give you, you know, the relationship that the American Cancer Society has with the NFL, which is the Crucial Catch program, was in place long before I got there. And the NFL is a wonderful and very generous partner. And a lot of people are familiar with the Crucial Catch program, and it's all about early detection and catching cancer early. You know, what a lot of people may not realize is all of the funds that are raised through that partnership go to fight health inequity. You know, one of the big aha moments when I first joined the Cancer Society was realizing the role of zip code in the U.S., which is a first world country, but neighborhoods that are 10 miles apart can have double the death rates, double the incidence rates. And it's all because of access to healthcare, being able to afford healthcare, education around healthcare. So shifting the money raised through that partnership towards health and equity is a social justice cause. Millennials like it. I mean, it's got so many, you know, it's wonderful for cancer itself and winning the war with cancer, but there were a lot of winners through that program because it touched a lot of passion points in the social justice world, which in turn, as you guys probably know better than I do, a big deal with the players, between the players in the league, and I mean, you can go on and on.
I mean, you know, right now, living in this COVID world where we're virtual, it's really a matter of, you know, how do you get creative to attract sponsors where it's basically they see their logo on your marketing material the day of the virtual event. And something that we did recently, we held a national conference and we brought in a significant amount of sponsorship money, even though the event was entirely virtual. By on the email piece, for instance, you could do an instant click to the sponsor. And I also had, I used this example on Friday, we had a local restaurant in Los Angeles where anyone who signed up for the national conference in Los Angeles received what's called a coupon to drive business back to the retailer. So, you know, in today's, because I don't know when we're having another in-person event, it's all virtual and you've got to be really creative to get those dollars. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I know right now it's about databases too. So if your organization has a large database of supporters that are willing, you know, that they've signed up and, you know, legally, you can send out newsletters with the sponsor's message in there. That's connect, and it's a message that resonates. You know, that's where people are using, and their social media. Do you have any influencers in your nonprofit, or can you find an influencer that has a large social media reach that can get your message out to more people, and then you then build up your social media following, your database, that then sponsors will say, wow, they have XYZ person on board that reaches a lot of people.
Yep.
That's another way.
I think to Lou's point though, I think like everything's digital now, right? So like you have to figure out what is your value proposition through a digital lens for everything. So you almost have to change your entire menu of assets that you can provide to these companies, right? So even days of service. So how can you do that virtually? How can you look at brand amplification virtually? We're doing like speaking of influencers, tomorrow we're launching with a company called Omaze, you know, which is an online platform that does charity raffles. You know, we're going to be featured there they're giving away the car in Ford versus Ferrari. And we got Matt Damon and Christian Bale to sign on as kind of our partners there through some connections we had on our board in LA. And so I think like Lou said, like using your connections to get people, influencers, other people involved in your brand that can help you, distribute virtually right now, and through digital, is like everything has to be done differently. And I think that's just like, if you can change to the times and you can pivot quickly, you can move. It sounds like Lou's been able to do that very, quickly. Like, I think you can have a lot of success here, but if you try to do the same old, you're not gonna succeed.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off that. So Omaze is a great company and great people over there. So I'm glad you brought them up, Seth. The shift to digital, I mean, if you think about all these new assets that are getting created, virtual presenting, kind of sponsorship rights, everyone's online, everyone's on Zooms, Microsoft Teams, you name it. And people want to be together. It's a perfect opportunity. We do work with a couple nonprofits that are almost a property in some respects, without naming their names. One of them in particular, that you would think that they skew older. They're going after esports, and they want to educate the younger consumer. And the younger esports is targeting everyone from like 8 to 25. And I guess once you hit 25, you get what's called a twitch finger, and you have to retire. But this is
Like my putting stroke.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a growing $300 billion industry, I believe is the stat, unless I'm making that up. But this is a older skewing nonprofit, and they were doubling down, and they came on board to our platform because they're like, you have really great esports data. That's what we're going after. We not only want to see the other properties that are out there that we can partner with and get our message out, but we want to see brands that are putting themselves out in front of this youthful audience. And I think every brand that's kind of growing and wants to target a younger audience, it's their goal to get in front of the 12 to 18 to 24-year-olds that are going to grow old with their brand. Now, that's a great opportunity to kind of educate them about these other kind of areas that they're not even thinking about. And if you think about like the esports in general, it's all streaming, right? It's young kids, students that are watching other people play video games, and there's tons of branding opportunities, and you're tapping into a very, very engaged audience.
Raj, if you get a chance, you got to check out Real Sports on HBO this month. They did a whole segment on gaming, and you said 25. I think you're over the hill at 18.
Yeah.
I mean, there's kids like 14, 15 years old are making $3-4 million a year driving Teslas. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that piece, and we did a lot of work we did a lot of spade work in the gaming space at the Cancer Society, and a lot of people don't understand how big it is.
It's enormous.
And it's like, I mean, we talked to the general manager of a team. It's like talking to an NFL general manager or a baseball general manager. They're talking about player salaries. They're talking about sponsorships. They're talking about
So that is
ratings on the streaming. And I mean, it's a very, very large, and it's a pretty generous audience as well. But it's a different kind of audience. It's $5 at a time. But in a digital world, there's very little underlying cost to that. But yeah, the influencers, those kids are, they've got big followings.
And if you could find one of them, one of these influencers, and they offer to host an esport fundraiser for you. You also need to get a corporate sponsor to sponsor that fundraiser. So then you're getting the small, $5 contributions, but you also have the company that wants to be associated with those young people that are playing the sport. So that's how.
Yeah, and one last thing, just on the esports front that was very interesting to see. There are these kind of grassroots event centers for young kids, students, and folks who just want to learn how to train. It's like a training program, and perfect for local sponsorship opportunities, perfect for nonprofits to come in with a local partner, whether it's a car dealership, and do a big co-branded promotion around education of something else, because these are students that are coming to these events to get educated, to learn about this particular esports industry. So you can couple that in. It's a natural tie in there.
And one of the participants wants to know, Seth, if your Ferrari event will be open to the public.
Oh yeah, it's launching tomorrow on Omaze, so hopefully you'll see it. I think it's winning the I don't know. I shouldn't even know. I should know the car. But one of the cars that I think Matt Damon drove, so it'll be open for the public.
And
There was a question, I just wanted to go back. There was a question earlier from Eugene. I don't know if we answered it entirely about when doing a first ask for a regional corporation, as an example, even with a personal relationship, how do you decide how much? And just to answer, in my opinion, there's two ways you could go about it. Like when going back to our golf tournament, I'll create a sponsor one sheet that lists all of our opportunities and it has a price. And it's almost like a menu. Or you could sit down with a sponsor and determine what their budget is and then come back with a customized proposal, which I always find better. When you can come back customized and then you actually give them, let's say it's a $25,000 package. And when you go back at the end of your event or at the end of your season, you evaluate everything and you show them, look, you paid $25,000, but you got like $75,000 in value. It's only going to help you renew the sponsor down the road and likely at a bigger cost also.
Yeah.
Again, you also have to think about how many people are going to attend your event or see the sponsor branding, because I get proposals all the time that are asking $10,000 and there's 100 people. So how much is that an acquisition, the acquisition cost per person, right? That's pretty high. So you also have to understand your value to that company and what else could they buy.
Yeah. I think you also gotta, you can also,
with those same dollars.
yeah, you can find, and you also find out what, I like to look at what, if you can find any information on what they've given to other places and what they value. I mean, you can figure out their marketing budget, you can figure out what they've given, you try to do as much due diligence as possible before you go in. But I think Lou's point is like, if you can get in there face to face and have a real conversation and build an authentic relationship, and that's your best opportunity to get success versus just sending in a proposal blankly.
And a lot of people want to tie it, do it cause related, meaning that they'll be a sponsor, but have a promotion related to that. So for, let's just say a DoorDash, for every meal that is ordered, 50 cents would go to your nonprofit. So you're encouraging their business, their sales, and, the additional funds that you get depends on how much you help them push this message.
Right.
So it's like having, equity in their company. You guys are both win-win if you push their business. So think about, adding something like that if it relates.
Yeah, a lot of places have like the point of sale. Like, I think it's getting a little bit tired now, but I think the point of sale, I know American Cancer Society did it a lot. Like the big brands can do it really, really well, where like you check out at a grocery store or CVS or one of the stores and they ask you if you want to donate. I think those come with bigger brands that are well known versus smaller brands, smaller organizations that don't have as much reach.
Yeah, I mean, we could do something with CVS, a roundup program, and I think they do it with several nonprofits, but we had a month on their calendar every year where at the point of sale, you could round it up $1, round it up $5, whatever.
Now, I'm all about partnering. If you are a small nonprofit and there's other small nonprofits in your area, but you're all have similar missions, you may be able to do a group sponsorship where they, get more visibility, reach more kids, have a greater impact. And so don't be afraid to partner and reach out if you think that's going to be a benefit. Does anybody have examples of that on this panel? So I've seen it work with, where there's been different nonprofits with different sports and say, our mission is to get our local kids healthy through sports and all the other benefits of sport. And we're formed together. You can be our partner to make make our community healthier. So, because
that's interesting. That happened at the Cancer Society a lot on the grant side. If you think there were two natural partners in the American Heart Association and the diabetes charities, and that the same lifestyle actions and lifestyle habits and things helped in all three of those areas, cancer, heart, and diabetes. It didn't happen so much on the sponsorship side and the fundraising event side. It was a little tougher from a competitive standpoint. probably shouldn't have been, but it was. But on the grant side, on the mission side, there was a lot of cooperation and a lot of partnering.
Good. So let's just sum it up. I'd like to go through each one of our guest speakers today to give a last piece of advice for people that are going to approach sponsorship. Seth, you want to start?
Sure. I think my biggest advice is do your homework, right? Figure out how the alignment between what you can do, what you do as a mission can impact another company, and how you're going to go in there with a mutually beneficial pitch. And I think it's all about, I really believe that relationships matter, and that use your connectors, use your people around you, use LinkedIn, whatever it is, but build strong, trusted, authentic relationships that will get you in the door with great people that can actually help realize your dreams as a nonprofit and your aspirations as an organization. So relationships, and do your homework, be smart about how you go about this.
And can I just jump in there? So how do you build those relationships? You join community groups. So you can join the Lions Club, you can join and you meet different business people. You read. Don't read the sports section, read the business section. Find out what executives are saying about where their company is going. Or maybe you'll hear about an executive says, I'm so for diversity. Well, okay, they're so for diversity. Maybe you have a real good diversity program. Reach out and say, I was so excited to read about how you're all in on diversity. I've got a great program for you. Call them on it.
Yeah. And maybe the first time you talk to them, don't make an ask. Maybe just actually build a relationship.
Yeah, sorry. Thank them, congratulate them on their, and you have to learn more about how they're getting involved with diversity. That's what you should do. I kind of jumped a few steps, but Rajit.
Yeah, so I think Seth put it perfectly, right? Relationships and doing your homework. And look, it's very easy to do desktop research to see who's done what with who in the past. I think the days of calling it sponsorship, it's starting to turn more into that word of partnership, right? Find the two-way value that makes sense for both sides, and it'll help kind of materialize whatever you're pitching and however much you're asking for. If you make it irresistible, the days of those transactional sponsorships, they're few and far between, but kind of knowing what the brand that you're going after, or the rights holder even, what their mission currently is and how their objectives align with yours. I think that little bit of digging that you do, however you get to it, whether it's desktop research or platforms like ours, that will go a long way. And then again, tapping into your network. It's okay to ask for help. I think the biggest trend I've seen is that people are willing to take meetings with anyone, especially using platforms like LinkedIn to connect. So make sure you're using your voice, reaching out to people proactively, and doing your digging.
And, not to take away from, Sponsor United, but if you go to LinkedIn and you put sponsorship and the company name, you can often find contacts and you can try to link in with them. Sponsor United gives you the whole name and contact.
Yeah. And, a lot of rights holders actually have created roles for folks that you guys are looking to speak to too. So LinkedIn is a great platform, and I highly encourage you guys leverage it.
Daryl?
I would say two things. One is acknowledge the elephants in the room. Right now, and if it's appropriate, COVID, social justice, are there ways that you can address those passion points while at the same time raising money for your nonprofit? Don't be afraid, and I don't think it's crass to try to leverage it. It's an elephant in the room. The second thing is a little more broad. We had a lot of success with the team we put together, and that's somebody told me before I joined the Cancer Society that I would learn early on that the only difference between a profit and a nonprofit is the tax status, or is a tax status. And that turned out to be true. We talked about margin, we talked about revenue, we talked about the same things we talked about trying to sell cell phones or trying to sell soda. So don't be afraid to position yourself as a marketing partner. I think we've said that in a lot of ways here today about relationships, about partnerships, or whatever. I would urge people to be fairly upfront about that. Everybody's kind of afraid to say what they're really doing. You're raising money and you're trying to do it by being a good marketing partner. You're trying to drive their business and your business, and be overt about it.
Great. And last but not least, Lou.
Going last, I could just say I agree with all you guys. I mean, I just mentioned it, but there's something that I have valued in my career is creativity. There's often times when you go to pitch a potential partner, it's not like they've just been sitting there waiting for you to come in and they're like, thank God you're here. Let me write you a check right now. You've got to be creative. And sometimes, thinking outside the box. I really despise the, I don't know why this term is used so often, the gold, silver, and bronze package. Go in and knock their socks off by doing something different. Listen to what the client wants, not what you want, which I believe Seth mentioned earlier on. And just one, I always used to use an example. I always love to use an example. One of the very first sponsorships I ever sold was to DirecTV in the mid-90s. And when I walked into the guy's office, he literally took out 35 proposals from other teams and said, why should I join the Clippers? I've got these other 35 proposals. And I was thinking, how am I so late to the game? But went back and created something that gave them a unique opportunity that knocked their socks off, and we got the deal. So I think creativity is key.
Yes. I just got a message that I have messages in a chat, but I'm not seeing any more that we have not addressed. If there's anybody who has a question, please, I don't know what to do yourself.
Yeah, make sure you got to click to everyone.
Yeah, I don't see it. Okay, great. Well, again, I want to thank our panelists of Rajit and Seth, Lou, and Daryl. Thank you so much for the insights. And I encourage all of you to do your homework, start building those relationships. When you form relationships, say, I see that we have mutual interest here. Let's talk about how we can form a partnership. And then think about all the assets you have. That's the verbiage that you use. What are those assets that you have that would be valuable for that company to leverage? So with that, I want to thank you all, and best wishes for success in the sponsorship world.
Thank you. Go Dodgers.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody be safe and well.
All right, take care. Bye.